Hello, Drawing One, and this is our virtual day. So I want to go over just really what you should have for this project up until this point, mainly because some people have been absent or just haven't handed things in, and so I just want everybody to be aware of what they should have. And then there's only a couple of things that I'm going to ask you to do today, and it really shouldn't take you a long period of time, but hopefully this will be an opportunity for everybody to get back on track, and so we're all sort of at the same place for this project. So the first thing that we did was this sort of experimental drawing where we soaked the paper in water. And if you are at home, I just said like to spray it or to put like a pretty good amount of water on it and to work from there. This piece right here, I worked from imagination. I said that you could work from a photograph. The photograph could be yours or not. The subject was really up to you. The point of this was to experiment with the material, lightly dragging the chalk pastel across the surface of this really sort of takes the pigments of the chalk pastel and really puts it down on the paper. And then what happens is that the water sort of activates the sizing of the paper, which is sort of the glue that holds it together. And so when everything dries, it will sort of lock in the chalk pastel into the paper itself. And this then is great when we start working with other materials on top of it. So after you did this initial drawing, is that what I wanted you to do was to develop that image further with your charcoal pencil. And so the charcoal pencil, you can see, really acts as a unifier because it puts this sort of black line over top of everything and doesn't really mix in with it. Again, mine's a very abstract piece. It sort of suggests a landscape. The subject, again, is wide open to you, and so that was the very first part of this assignment, and most people have handed that in. I'll sort of go over that in a minute or two. So the second part of this assignment is to sort of experiment with materials further. So this was, and I've seen that a lot of people have this submitted, but not, I would say, about half the class, etc. So for this, you should be working with roughly 4 by 5 inch blocks. You're going to be doing 3 drawings from direct observation. So when I say direct observation, like looking in a mirror and not from a photo. So you can see there that I said 3 drawings from direct observation with a mirror, not from a photo. And these are really opportunities to experiment with materials. So much so, I want you to actually identify what materials you're experimenting with. This is also an opportunity to experiment with, say, style and composition and things like that. But when you're working with direct observation, you can't really take a lot of dynamic angles and things like that. So we'll get to that in a second. So when you hand this part of the assignment in, it's just referred to as the direct observation portrait, and then you need to put 3 images. They should be experimenting with, they should be 3 different experiments, not just a variation of the same. And then you should also label what those materials are. So like on the bottom there, I say chalk pastels and then watercolor, ink, etc. So that's the second part of this assignment. The third part of this assignment, I think I just went in class, I just identified that I mixed rubbing alcohol with the background there. Anyway, moving on. So the second part of this is, or the third part I should say, is the indirect observation portrait. Again, we're going to be working with a small 4 by 5 inch sort of experimental features, and you are going to need photographic references for this that you've taken. And you should be working with black and white because we are really concentrating on value for this part of it. And so here's some examples that Miss K took, and these are close-ups, and they can be. So these can be really close, but you can see that the light source is really at a high contrast, and that's because the room's usually a little darker, and then there's a direct light from one side that you are pretty close to as far as the light source. So it could either be a window inside of a dark room, it could be a light from one area if you have like a table lamp or some sort of spotlight. Anything like that, that's going to throw in a high amount of contrast, but the images shouldn't be like flat, sort of like the way I'm lit right now shouldn't be like that. And I think you can see that too when you convert these images to black and white. So they can be focused close-ups like this. You can also think about other ways of sort of creating variations. And so students have done this. They've sort of cropped themselves in a number of different ways. And sometimes diagonals are also important to think about, just by having that sort of diagonal within the picture there, within the cat next to it, is that creates sort of visual interest. If everything's always sort of vertical or horizontal, they tend to be a little bit more boring and stagnant. Sometimes you want that in an image to sort of have this sense of stillness, but sometimes by taking a subject that's still and then by adding diagonals, it can really sort of enlighten things. So these can be, well lit. The one on the right, that's probably what a good portrait is going to look like when you take it in color before you convert it to black and white. Every program allows you to convert things to black and white pretty easily. So cropping is something you should be thinking about too. We've talked about composition space in this class a lot of times by now, so that's something that you really need to consider as well. You shouldn't have just everything just plugged right in the center of the image. Perspective it can really change the way that we view portraiture too. So perspective is that we are the camera's like down low here looking up, and some of these have been pretty experimental by students, is that this is a really tight cropping on the image that we're looking at here. This one I think is interesting because the lens is really blown out, so what happens there is that the spotlight is very, very bright, and then the contrast is sort of pushed to its limits, and I think it can have an effect that can really work in some images. This feels almost like a horror movie because of the way that this is shot. I have some other images, but I'm going to show you also the background. This one I think is interesting because the background is really well considered, especially with the mirror in the image. So that can be something too. So I did 3 myself. Oh, I had one more here. I thought that was it. This was one that somebody considered multiples. So today, all that you are going to do is hand in 3, minimally 3. You can see the left one there is probably a more traditional sort of a portrait. The one on the top is more of a tight crop, and I'm really considering, that's actually my hand there. That's sort of cropping from the right side. And you can see that the light source is pretty direct on all of these, is that I had a spotlight and I had it pretty close to the image. So minimally 3 today. And so when I say today, I mean like by 11:59 p.m. at night, not the end of the school day is the time that you have. So just going back into next class, we're going to talk about how to use these as references and start working on paper and how to work with proportions, etc. But today, that's all I'm going to ask that you do. If going to our folder here, this is just all under Chalk Pastel Experimentations, is that the soaked paper first assignment should be there. And if I go in here, I can see that just about everybody, oops, let me get my face out of the way here. Looks like just about everybody, not quite, submitted that so far. So if you don't see your name on the list here, please do that. And as far as the second part here with the 3 direct image photos from direct observation, oh come on. This is portrait materials experiments from direct observation. That's where you should submit the 3. I've already had a few people submitting that. So if you don't see your name on that list, you should definitely submit that material today. And oh, come on, here we go. I do have the examples I went over class there, but they're all sort of redundant. Even this portrait overview is the Google slide document that we were just looking at. And then the indirect observation is that you are going to be submitting your photos here, and then you're also going to be submitting your drawings once you complete them, but that's just the one part of the assignment. So obviously no one submitted anything there as of yet, so that's the goal for today. I will activate that folder in a second. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'd like everybody to have all this done so we can all be at the same page. So if you were absent or whatever, you can sort of catch up between now and next class period. Great. Enjoy your virtual day. Stay warm. Feel free to help out with the shoveling of the snow or whatever when that starts. And I don't know what the schedule for the rest of the week's going to be. They still haven't called it as far as whether or not they're going to cancel school on Thursday. I think they're going to wait until they see some actual snow on the ground to do so. So, great. That's it. Thanks a lot, everybody.